they're willing to do the test, but sustainability, so I'm just wondering what help you think you need from leadership to what you learned.
Leadership has to be the one to ask them, not ask them, maybe just tell them this is one of the new, like, the things you have to do.
It's a change.
Yeah. Because it definitely from the residents, they're not going to want to change.
No, I agree.
Like every single, there's at least 5 girls at Venice, every single one of them is like, no way. I'm like, it's one click.
They're more receptive.
No, I hate to say, but yeah, it is true. Venice will be complicated.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking was that it could be perhaps that people that have email have sort of higher literacy and less barriers, which might bias your results a little bit. However, if you make it easier for those people, then you have more time to dedicate to those that need more time and attention.
So here's if that might be the starting point is, could you at least agree to do the email, because look, you've got data to show. You don't have data for the other input yet, but that might be just a starting point to ask for the first thing first, even though, as you said, maybe this is not, it's not going to completely solve the problem, but it made a dent, and just a dent to something that probably saves our time a little bit too. So anyway, great work, thank you.
Also, like I wanted to mention, like one other thing that I've noticed is they take a long time trying to find the phone numbers of physicians and like specialists and stuff. So if they even like tell them on the phone, like have a list of everybody.
Your contacts.
Yeah, like
be prepared.
Yeah, so yeah, be prepared with contact information and names.
Yeah.
Because that takes them such a long time to like try to look up. You know, I feel like that's a lot. But anyway.
Okay, this is our QA project. You guys know who we are. So in terms of the problem statement, our disclaimer is this may not necessarily be the most objective, but at least this is a problem statement that we formulated using this particular focus group, as well as from our mentors here. The problem statement of interest is UCLA pediatric residents have insufficient time to complete dental encounter notes in between patients, and as a result, we'll have multiple incomplete notes at the end of the clinic day. Not only does this actually then lead to incomplete encounters, but we're also having concern that this leads to a decrease in the accuracy of the notes content once we are finished seeing patients and actually start sitting down to complete our notes. So, as a remedy or a solution, we created an AIM. So we, very similar to our medical counterparts that utilize smart notes, we figured this is also something achievable within our system. So we wanted to create and implement a smart note template on AxiUm. Specifically for this department, to see if we can increase the efficiency, and we'll define this by a reduced time in terms of a note completion, so we have something that we can measure, quantifiable, and consistency, which we'll measure as accuracy, a little bit more difficult, of dental encounter notes. So the goal is, because this is under a testing format, it's fairly, well, Melissa will talk about the easiness of implementation, but once we implement it, after about a week of usage, we figured that we'll be able to increase the overall efficiency. Again, the increase in efficiency will be defined by a decrease in the reported time of the completion of the notes, which will be measured by minutes and seconds, and also reduced time in between patient encounter and note completion of the encounter notes. We also then expect a subsequent decrease in the number of charge reports by 50%. This is something we'll have to look at the end of the week because our billing, I shouldn't say our billing department, our coordinator does review them on a week-to-week basis and make sure it's by Friday. We figured a weekly review will be able to help us quantify whether or not we're making our 50% goal. And again, it'll be measured by using the tab on AxiUm, which already exists, by uncharged missing notes in the report.
Alright, so what are some of the things that cause this problem of unwritten and incomplete notes at the end of the clinic day? Looking at people, so some residents prefer to sit down after a long clinic day and and do the notes all in one sitting. So see their patients and then write all the notes, so a personal preference. Patients coming late to the appointments may also decrease the amount of time you have at the end of the appointments to finish those notes. Not enough faculty coverage, or if you do have faculty coverage, they may be, busy or spending their time with the restorative patients, and so you kind of just feel like, oh, I'll just write it later and get it signed.
Do you need the faculty to review your notes or just to sign off on them?
Yes.
Yeah, review and sign off.
But you can still write them.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that
Systems wise, Specifically in Venice, when we do see a patient, the residents are in charge of scheduling their next appointment, giving prizes, writing excuse notes. So that kind of takes up a solid like 10 minutes itself at the end of each appointment. So that's one of the problems of not having enough time. Currently, right now, we don't have any standardized template in AxiUm, so everyone kind of just freehand, free note or copy and paste old notes. And also, as Melissa's going to talk about, there is a financial cost to implement this smart note in AxiUm. So all these things can contribute to all these unwritten notes. And then so our aim was to increase the efficiency of writing notes, which will lead to a 50% decrease of uncharged reports weekly. And some of the primary drivers that we thought of, our project focused on creating a template that will auto-populate and minimize the amount of typing per note. Another primary driver was to implement stricter late policies. So as the other group was talking about, that sometimes patients come like past the grace period, and we feel bad because they're coming from really far, so we still see them.
Yeah, we have hearts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Everybody guilt trips, but that's one of them. And then also hiring more assistants. Sometimes you have to turn over your own cubes if all the assistants are busy. And so for the purpose of our project, we wanted to create, we can solve this issue or help increase the efficiency by creating a standardized template, and we need to acquire the necessary funding to pay for this template.
That's a good question. How does the template, the minimizing the amount of typing, improve the uncharged reports?
So it will lead to less time spent writing.
Oh, okay, so you have the notes so that it can actually be built.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, I can talk about it now. It's basically that some people end up, because it's a long day, maybe they say, okay, I'm just gonna write the note later, and then they either forget or they decide to do it the next day, and then it just doesn't get done.
It misses
and then
the
it
cycle.
gets lost in the system, and then it creates an uncharged report, which is bad for billing purposes, in addition to our own efficiency.
So when they go do the billing, they don't have the information they need to do the billing, and it doesn't get submitted.
Correct, yeah.
And the process map for this, so basically, after you complete your planned procedures, you eventually do get your faculty approval of the SOAP note that you write. So both of these pathways lead to faculty approval. However, it's the efficiency and time that we tested with our results that we're going to show that is the big difference.
So this is the template note that we created with the help of Cheryl, who is kind of in charge of the AxiUm system here. So we ran into a couple of kind of speed bumps issues in terms of making this an actual note. The best compromise we could come to was actually making it a form instead of an auto-populated note, based on what AxiUm is able to do at this school. So we took that as a compromise. So we had her create a form for us that we took into account. All of us kind of have our own templates for our notes, which are somewhat similar, but we kind of created a combined one that goes over everything and is pretty thorough. And if you click into each of these tabs, it opens up more options that you can click into.
But then it would go to the SOAP note?
No, this stays in the forms. That's the current. So the conference, we had a lot of talks about how to actually make it show up in the notes area. The only thing that you could do is if you pay, they wouldn't tell me.
How much?
They wouldn't tell me the amount.
I was told it's $200 per hour for an AxiUm technician to create something. It's $200 per hour. So I'm not sure how many hours it would take.
Right, but this is a great first step. So
it sounded like a fee in order to implement this feature where once you complete this form, it auto makes a note, but the note doesn't say what the form says, it just says C form. It makes a note that says like
Okay, so
look at the form, yeah.
We wouldn't be seeing as we see today,
Correct,
right?
yeah, you would have to go over to the Forms tab and click into each date to see.
We don't want that.
So that's, yeah, that was one of, so this is kind of the compromise that we had, for the purposes of this project in order to see how, if we had something that was easier to use in the form of a form. So this is an example of what our current notes look like. Basically, each of us have like a template. This is a sample of like a simple patient that we're going to use in our cases later that we use to test this project.
Sorry.
So this is kind of what it is now, and the previous slide is what it would be potentially with the forms.
So for the PDSA cycle, we added a template note to AxiUm forms that will minimize the amount of typing and auto-populate certain information. We timed the speed of residents to complete template note versus control, and surveys were conducted to get feedback and recommendations. So 4 residents tested the new template versus the control, and were timed.
That one as a form?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And we're timed. Results will show you right after this. And survey questions asked residents whether they thought this new template made writing notes more efficient, and we included an open-ended question for any recommendations improvement in the survey. And then the study, one of the biggest findings was we found it was 2 times faster with the template note that we implemented, especially for the more complex patients that we used. And survey feedback was that overall residents thought it was more efficient, like we predicted.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
On the, so you actually on the form you were able to get certain information auto-populated?
So no, so in this format that we had to also compromise and do it in like the test AxiUm. We couldn't actually implement it into the actual AxiUm system. If you do get it implemented into AxiUm, you can have auto-populate features, but for the testing, we didn't have that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be even faster?
Even faster, right.
And what was your next, were you just going to go?
Oh yeah, we just.
Yeah. So since we didn't have it actually implemented into AxiUm, we couldn't use it on our own patients, so we just used some sample cases of like a typical patient you might see. So our first case was a healthy 2.5-year-old, need a knee exam, no significant findings, pretty quick visit. The second case was a patient with a few medical issues and also some decay and some caries that we're planning for treatment. So we tested both scenarios to see if we saw a difference in easy note versus a difficult note. So after we sent the form of what we wanted to Cheryl, we came back, she sent it back to us, we tested it, and we had a couple of suggestions for changes that we wanted, which are listed here, and this is kind of like a example of what we asked her to change. So adding some more options, some more click down menus, some more fields. And then these are our final results. So if you go to the next slide, it shows it in a chart format. So in general, the test template was faster than the general note, but we see more of a significant difference when it comes to the more complex patient. So the 2-year-old patient, it may be like a marginal difference, but in the 6-year-old patient who had more complex needs, it was significantly faster.
So is this the time it took to complete one note?
Yes.
450 minutes?
Seconds?
Seconds.
So if you go back, sorry, the previous one was minutes.
Well, just to be fair, some of us are slower typers and one of us was handicapped in the hand. So there was a couple outliers on this one.
Yeah, so this is like, if you look at the minutes, it's like almost double the time to do it with the template versus the.
And each of your 4 residents did
Yes,
one of each.
yeah, we each did one of each, yeah.
But, it was like the potato head. I'm not defending my numbers. I'm just saying I had to figure out the form again because I forgot what the content of the form is. So when you go in fresh the first time,
Sure.
Yeah.
they are faster, it's true, but I just had to look through what
Now I know
was
which column is yours.
Next one.
Next slide.
Next, John.
Oh, sorry.
That's the one.
Okay, so the feedback that we got was that, like John said, you do need like an initial explanation of what the form contents are, because you need to know what the click down options are ahead of time to know if you should click them or not. We also found that, and this is something that we may need to discuss, is that instead of clicking within normal limits for each individual thing, we opted to say that no answer meant within normal limits. But because you can click yes, no, and if you click yes, then you have to click it. So if you just click no, so we basically said if there's a relevant finding, click yes. If it's no findings,
So
don't
you
click at all.
So you have to default as no as
yes,
within
exactly.
normal limits.
Yes. And then once you kind of got the hang of it, we found it was pretty easy to click through the note. It would make it faster if we had calculated fields like for age and for their, going off of the odonogram, what their treatment plan would be. So there's a lot of possible implementations of it. And then, of course, as we've already talked about, the concern over using forms instead of notes that we have in the actual system. And then just some final thoughts, that we found that the templated notes seem to increase the speed of completing notes. We weren't able to actually test the process to see if it, reduced the number of uncharged reports, but this is just kind of that initial step to see if it's something that we want to implement on a larger scale. Calculated fields can increase the efficiency, and that, I said this one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. And then the residents generally found that it was a good experience. Yeah.
So one more thing that we just omitted, because I did mention in one of our goals or aims, was to actually test accuracy. But the interesting thing is, it was just my bias. It turns out that none of, when we talked to our Becky, our expert about this, none of our notes have been rejected in terms of their approval, as an inaccurate diagnosis or inaccurate representation. So having that as some sort of a metric or standard when you already start from a baseline of 0 is very hard to try to improve when you're already perfect. Yeah. So we just ditched it. Forgot to mention. Yeah.
Great.
We had something like this at UOP, and every time the whole note gets swiped, but you only let's say medical history changed. It would say updated this date, but you update it every time, and then you can go back to the history of that one little thing and see what was different.
Yeah.
So it is kind of
No, but that's for medical history. We have this here. We already have for medical history, but they're talking about no.
You're right. We had our notes were like that. Like we were going.
Yeah, and same with at Columbia, they had free copies.
Our project is on basically